Hey, Lee.
Yeah, Dan, what's up?
I guess we got a big get on this episode. You know, a good get?
Yeah, a good get is like when you get somebody that to interview that might actually be of a importance in the field.
Something like that. Anyways, we are continuing Documentary December with Demon House with cinematographer Jay Wasley. Mike, roll it.
You are listening to the Beyond Terrestrial Podcast, your one-stop shop for the outstanding, the unconventional, and the downright strange. Strap in because the boys are about to take a wild ride. I'm Funk Master B, setting up that tea for the duo of Dumbfoolery. Your hosts, Dan and Lee.
Of course I believe in aliens. I mean, in an infinitely growing universe, why would we be the only living species? Bigfoot, Nessie, all that stuff, it's gotta be real. How are we to say that we're the only ones? It's just ignorant. I think aliens are not only from other planets, but they're time travelers.
Welcome back, Beyonders. I'm Lee, coming to you as always from the Haunted Barn Studios. However, I am running the mobile setup today, so it is, as I like to refer to it, as the mobile Haunted Barn Studios. I'm still in the Bell Witch's backyard of Clarksville, Tennessee, and Dan, I am excited. But first, Dan, who are you?
Well, if you don't know, now you know. You're Lee. I'm Dan Martson. I am recording just down from the crossroads where Robert Johnson made his infamous deal with the devil. And we have got an excellent show to continue Documentary December today, Lee. Someone who actually worked on the documentary we watched.
That is awesome. Like, that is
so
awesome.
Let's bring him in. We've got one of the OGs, the founding fathers of Beyond Terrestrial, Mike Roop. Say hi, Mike.
Hello, sir. People out there, Beyonders, great wide world.
Yes, and who did you bring along with you?
I brought along with me a gentleman, a scholar, one of my good friends, Mr. Jay Wasley.
It's all debatable except for Jay Wasley. That's me.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool.
And
now,
Mike, what do you have on today? Is that a Gucci? Is that?
Yeah, it's a Gucci cape. I forgot to tell you about this,
right?
Jay. The reason I'm wearing this cape right now is I wear a cape every single time we record episodes.
Oh, nice.
And so you get to we're in Vegas, wanted to make it nice and
I see
fancy.
How it is. I see how it is,
Gucci.
Mike. You bring on one of your showbiz friends. You put on the Gucci cape.
I have to
try and impress.
I got to impress him.
That's cool.
I got the bells.
Stop outing me here, man.
That's cool. No, that's cool. I see where we rate. But that's all right.
Vegas changes people.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it's true. Well, a lot of folks who are listening probably know Jay from his work on Ghost Adventures. Very cool.
Thank you.
But today we watched a documentary that features Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures, a movie called Demon House. Very cool documentary, available on Amazon Prime Video, probably on YouTube. I think on Hulu too. I don't know. It's a bunch of places. Watch it on Prime. I mean, we all got Amazon. Go watch it there. So guys, if you want to get the lowdown on the movie, you should probably watch it first and then come back, or listen to this first and then go watch it, and you'll understand a little bit about what went on behind the scenes. Very cool stuff. But Jay, you've been in show business since going back to like 2000, 2001?
Yeah, around there. About, I guess, kind of bigger stuff started around 2002, I think, roundabout.
That's really cool.
So long.
And you've like done it all. You've done commercials, you've done cable TV, network TV, features, like the whole works, right?
Oh yeah, I think in this business too, there's nothing, you kind of have to work on what comes through. Sometimes it's a commercial, TV show, music video, movies, corporate stuff, kind of anything, to keep the lights on.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, I think some of our very, very loyal Beyonders might recognize Jay. You did a little bit of voice work for us in the new intro.
Oh yeah, I thought I heard something that sounded familiar.
Yes. That is very cool, man. Thank you for doing that. That is
absolutely.
awesome.
It was fun.
It's
we're
cool
just sitting
to have
here at Simple Equation. Sorry to cut you off there. And
no.
it was late at night, and I was working on the theme, and I was like, "Hey man, you want to say a bunch of shit into a microphone?" And he's like, "Okay." So he just started ranting about aliens.
It was the easiest $10,000 I ever made.
Yeah, man.
Which I'm still waiting on the
Right.
check, by the way, guys.
Right.
I thought you guys were gonna pay.
That's where all our Patreon support has gone, right there.
Nah, it was a lot of fun.
Both of them.
Happy to help.
No, that's cool. No, it was really good. So yeah, very cool stuff. And then Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel, probably your most widely known, accessible work to folks. How did you get started on that show?
Yeah, they actually called me back in 2010, maybe even 2009, 2010. I was working in a lot of reality TV as a sound guy, as a camera guy, just kind of hopping from show to show, doing different gigs. And I was working on this show for Discovery Channel called Wreck Chasers, where we followed tow truck drivers around Philadelphia. And it was insane. We had to wear bulletproof vests. It was like that could be a whole story in its own right there.
I was going to say, that's Philadelphia for you, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it was fun. And but the company that produced that show also produced Ghost Adventures. So originally, when Ghost Adventures first started, they used to always hire a local sound guy wherever they would go. So, they were always getting different people to come in. And, as you've watched the show, sometimes the show's out in the middle of nowhere, these small towns. And it was kind of, they got to a point where they were having trouble finding decent sound guys. And because I was working on this show with the company, they were like, oh, let's throw you out on Ghost Adventures. So they called me and they're like, hey, are you available these dates? We got a gig for you. And at first I just thought it was a gig. I was like, all right, I'm going to go out and record sound for the show. I flew out to Vegas, actually, landed. The production manager picked me up. We drove out to Goldfield, Nevada, and filmed an episode at the Goldfield Hotel. And it was awesome. It was really cool, but like I said, at first I just thought it was a gig, and everyone was great and really nice. And I remember when the episode finally came out, it was one of the first times from working in TV, you work on a project and then you see it actually come out. It's who knows what they do with it. But Ghost Adventures was the first project where I was like, wow, when it came out, I was like, this is what really happened. This is, it's not twisted. It's not, over sensualized or anything. Like, this is true to, the events that happened while we were there. And I really, saw the integrity and kind of fell in love with it in a way, like the production aspect of it. And from there, then they brought me back and I started working more episodes and being on the road with the guys. We became good friends, and, it's only a small crew anyway. So we were always traveling and got to know each other. And then probably about a year or so after I started working, I remember we filmed in Jamaica at Johnny Cash's house, and the episode afterwards, we're driving somewhere in Arizona, and Zach's like, hey, Jay, like, we caught this EVP in Jamaica at Johnny Cash's house, and we think it sounds like Johnny Cash. And you hear Zach say, do you like Johnny Cash's music? And you hear this voice go, yeah. Like, out of nowhere. It was a crazy EVP. And he's like, do you think that sounds like Johnny Cash? And I was like, well, actually, if you want, you can do a comparison where you can take a waveform, basically kind of almost like a fingerprint of Johnny Cash's voice, and compare it to a waveform of, this EVP, and kind of see if they relate and if they're close in frequency range and things like that. And he was like, wow, you can do that? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, all right, you do that. And then he brought me on the show to actually do that. And that was my first appearance on the show, was doing this analysis. And then from then, it just kind of kept growing, and, I'd throw out ideas and they'd be like, that's great, do it. and then they started bringing me in a little bit at a time to kind of do different experiments and things like that, and then kind of just kept evolving from there.
Dude, that's really cool. Especially with the Johnny Cash voice. I think that's really neat. Such a unique voice too to start with.
And I gotta say,
really
it lined
cool.
up really close too. Like when you hear it, it was like just listening, you're like, that does sound just like Johnny Cash. It was pretty wild.
That's awesome. I gotta admit, I haven't really watched much of the show, but you guys did like a big series over in Vicksburg, and we live like half an hour away on the outskirts of Jackson. And so I've been delving into those ones, but I could like I started with the doll store, which was a bad choice. I should have picked another one.
Surprisingly pretty crazy, you know, like,
dude, that
like
one's creepy.
Yeah, and like you wouldn't. I mean, just dolls are creepy anyway. But like the story of it was like an old man and his wife died, and he's kind of keeping the collection going. And you know, we weren't expecting anything, and then to get the evidence we did, you know, capturing dolls moving, and it was pretty wild.
Yeah, I've run in. Lee, I don't know if you know this. There's like a hole-in-the-wall museum run by a collector in Idaho Falls that reminded me of that doll shop, but that's just an aside. You'll have to check it out sometime. If the guy's still alive. I don't know
if I've ever seen that. And I lived in Idaho Falls for many years.
What's the place called, Dan? I don't know if I ever told you this, Dan, but I was actually born and raised in Idaho Falls. But
it's something, a collection museum. This guy he's got random collections of things, toys, memorabilia. They're like really small, and his son's a cabinet maker, so he built all these really cool custom cabinets for it. Which honestly, the cabinetry's almost as impressive as the collections. But yeah, it's actually really cool. Just little hole in the wall. He runs it on donations. I mean, it's out in the middle of nowhere, so but that's neither here. That's a total aside, isn't it? I think, Lee, before we get more off track, we should take a quick break, and then we'll get into talking about the documentary of the day, Demon House.
Oh, hey there, Count Panic. I got a question for you.
What's that, Bob?
What do you know about Mothman, the Loch Ness Monster, ghosts, demons, and things that go bump in the night?
Not much, Bob.
Well, lucky for you, we host a podcast called Bob After Dark, where we talk about legends, lore, and the supernatural.
Wow, where can I find this podcast?
Wherever you find your great podcasts at.
Welcome back, Beyonders. We've been talking with Jay from Ghost Adventures and a documentary that we have watched and are excited to discuss called Demon House. Just before the break, though, Jay was informing us about how he kind of got into Ghost Adventures, and one thing that he mentioned was the being able to analyze the waveform. And I don't have nearly as much experience as the two guys on the other end of this call here, Mike and Jay, but even I, and in my little bit of experience, can recognize every time Dan says "but" in the waveform without hearing it.
Wow!
Oh, me too. That's so funny. I can recognize that too.
Wow! What a call out, dude. Now I'm gonna be so self-conscious.
I'm sorry, Dan. I didn't mean to make you self-conscious.
Wow, thank you.
It's okay.
No, it's all right. It's all right. But anyways, the subject of the subject of the day is Jay's documentary Demon House. Guys, if you haven't watched it, go do. Especially if you're a fan of Ghost Adventures, you'll get a whole. How long's the doc, Jay? Like 90 some minutes? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a full feature length, so somewhere between hour and a half ish.
Yeah. And it's great. Like if you like Ghost Adventures, I think this is really good because you can just do a lot more in a feature. You can get more into the story, break down some of the different parts of it. It's like a really big, cool, great episode of Ghost Adventures. But like even freakier because there's a 12-foot tall goat man.
Yes. Now, Dan, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt or anything like that, but I do think we need to acknowledge something. We need to acknowledge that we are speaking with our friends at Simple Equations Media. Simple Equations Media is an all-around video and audio production company that can take your project from start to finish without, or Dan, I need a little help here. I'm trying, but you've got that down. I don't.
You know what?
Dude, you did that in front of the owner. Like, what are you doing?
I know,
dude?
like you flubbed the ad read right here with the guy. That was bold. That was very
we
bold
stuff.
of you.
Yeah, stuff gets done.
Very bold, sir.
I just want to make sure that he knows we're doing the ad read.
I was going to let him tell us about it, and then we could use his audio
I think that's
later.
a great ad just like that. It's memorable.
At least like 2 more customers are going to
Right.
that.
Right.
Wait, hold on. The phones are ringing.
I fuck that ad read up from Dan every single episode in one way or another.
Oh gosh. Oh wow. What a gag
Love it.
that's become. But anyways, we were just getting into this doc. All right.
I apologize.
Let's talk about the story, and then we'll talk about Jay's business a little bit. Let's talk about this story. All right. 2011, this lady named LaToya Ammons, her kids, I think like her mom too, they're living in this house in Gary, Indiana, Lee. What do you know about Gary, Indiana?
I've heard the name of it. I know that it's in Indiana. I know that it's not in Indianapolis.
Right.
You're
yeah.
welcome.
Ooh, correct.
From the movie, I learned that it's a few hours, like it's an hour and a half to 2 hours away from Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's in the very like northwest corner of Indiana, right by Chicago, on Lake Michigan.
On
there.
one of those lakes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So-
kind of known for, what's it? It's probably best known for homicide, I think.
Yeah, I would say.
And I think it has a song in The Music Man too, right? Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana. The Music Man. All right. You guys not fans?
Rough place. I've never been there.
Yeah.
Was that a crazy rough place?
Yeah, I mean, they're known. It's kind of a rougher place.
Yeah.
It's just, we spent a lot of time there, and, we joke and say that, but, like, statistically, yeah, it's known for crime and everything. But it wasn't, like, everyone that we actually met were actually really nice. And, even people coming up to us on the streets at times while we're filming and being like, oh, no, like, what's going to happen? And they're like, oh, hey, guys. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. Everyone's cool.
Yeah, it's a Rust Belt city. A lot of the manufacturing
I think it's just a
is
town
left.
that, like, industry, some industry, whatever was there, probably died out and went away, and just kind of, just didn't fully rebound back.
Right. And a lot of the problems you have in a very nearby city like Chicago, you also have in a slightly smaller city like Gary. So, but yeah, I mean, it's got a song in The Music Man, so it can't be all that bad, right? And so LaToya Ammons, her family, they live in this house, and after they move in, they start having weird experiences, noises in the basement, shadowy figures, and then the kids start showing some of the effects, Lee. And eventually, like, they take these kids to the hospital, and they're like saying they're gonna kill people, and they're freaking out, like convulsing, and one of them like runs backwards up the wall, and that is like witnessed by doctors, nurses, all kinds of folks, and these kids show a lot of the classic signs of possession.
Yeah.
And I think that was like one of the things that drew us to the story too, was that there was so many credible witnesses. Everyone has a ghost story, everyone says things happen, but with this story in particular, the kids were going to school and showing up with bruises and things like that. So actually, the CPS workers got involved because they were investigating possible child abuse, because these kids were coming in all bruised up. And then they went to the house and visited the house and then did interviews with the family. And then every time they would do this, social workers, the chief of police was with them, other police officers were with them, and they would all witness these paranormal activities occur. So it was probably one of the most, that has the most credible witnesses, whether they're like officials in the police department or social workers and things. And then when they went to the hospital ultimately, and he ran backwards up the wall and was like talking in tongues, things like that, like the doctors and more social workers all witnessed this all happen.
Yeah. In the documentary, there's some of the footage from like the police chief. I guess he brought a camera into the house, and the blinds were dripping, and you can see like the house have strange effects on people. One of the social workers like touched the dripping blinds, and it turned half of her hand like pale, like white. That was actually really kind of freaky. I thought that was a weird one.
Real quick, Dan, one thing I wanted to ask kind of about that stuff, like, are these things like in all your travels, have you ever seen anything like that before? Because the oil was like a new thing. I'd never seen anything
the oil
like
was
that
a new thing, and
then the walking the backwards. I mean, there's like weird things that happen to possessed people.
Right.
They do all sorts of weird physical things, but that was something that
I've
was
seen like
totally...
people like contort themselves and like even almost break their bones and dislocate things like through possessions. But this one was like, it was definitely sticking out as there was these new things like the oil and touching it and like having physical symptoms on your hand, things like that. So it was just everything we learned about it was just more intriguing, and we just kept wanting to dive in deeper and deeper into the story.
Yeah, it's a wild one. And the family, they were particularly religious. They had tried prayer and set up altars and all kinds of different things. Eventually, they went to the Catholic Church and had a number of exorcisms performed on the house and eventually on the mother, LaToya, to rid them of these demons that were affecting them. Evidently, the exorcism took. LaToya said she felt a lot better after hers, but the house was still freaky.
Yeah, it definitely didn't leave the house when they did that. And I remember when I was able to track down where she lived currently. I don't know now, but while we were filming, we found where she was living. We wanted to try to talk to her, see if she would talk to us. And, we literally went. She didn't return any of our calls, things like that. So we literally went and knocked on her door, and she refused to talk to us. She felt that she was afraid that because we've been to the house at that point, that whatever was there could have been attached to us and kind of come back to her. So she just wanted nothing to do with it and didn't want to talk to it at all. Yeah,
really cool. Now, Lee, this is where we get into some of our questions here. A lot of the credible witnesses, police officers, social workers, they visited the house and had effects. Like they said they heard things. They said they were freaked out by the place. They didn't want to go back. And one of these, some of these social workers had long-term effects where they sought psychological counseling and all kinds of things after this encounter. Really crazy stuff. Lee, what about these long-term effects, man? What do you think?
The long-term effects are interesting to me. From an outside perspective, in many cases, it could look almost like several unrelated cases. Then you have your outliers. You have your ones like the lady that was there when the child walked backwards up the wall and said she had to, have counseling. Basically, she'd been in counseling since. Yeah, I get that. If I saw somebody possessed climb up backwards up a wall, yeah, I'd want counseling too. But some of the other ones, the police chief getting in an accident, it's hard to not feel like there's a little bit of the mummy's curse kind of thing going on in that aspect. Mm-hmm. Jay, what are your thoughts? How are these things connected? Is there something below the surface that I'm not seeing?
I would say how they're connected. It was weird that it seemed whoever would come to the house, like we would bring the police chief with us to the house, things like that, and literally he would leave, and then he would call us maybe an hour later and be like, "Oh my God, this just happened to me!" Like as soon as he left, I don't remember exactly. There, we had stuff where like we had the internet guy that came and installed the internet, and he's there, and he leaves, and all of a sudden crazy shit's happening at his house, and he's having problems, and it seemed like everybody that would come to the house, they would leave, and then they would contact us and be like, "This crazy shit just happened to us," like, and it was always after they left the house, which was kind of weird. And I remember even the chief of police, or not the chief of police, but one of the detectives, I think when he left the house one time, which it's wintertime and like, accidents happen, but it was just weird. Like, I remember one time he slipped and hit his head on the ice, like as soon as he left the house. And then one case that really jumped out to me during the filming was we found a woman who lived in the house, I think back in the 90s, and we brought her to the house, and she had her children with her, and she wanted to, she's like, "Oh, can I bring the kids in?" We're like, well, I mean, you're the mom, so if you feel comfortable with it, that's your choice, And she like walked in, and I remember they left, and the kids were kind of like showing concerns about what was going on there and all that. And then I don't know if I think it was that night, we're all just literally sitting at the hotel room kind of planning our next day, what we're going to do. We get a phone call from her, and she's frantic and saying that her daughter, who was in the house earlier that day, tried to kill herself, and now she's in the hospital, and she's freaking out. And we ended up ultimately bringing her back, and we talked to her, and she didn't remember any of it. She didn't remember what happened. And then we ended up actually getting the priest who performed the original exorcism on the Ammons family to perform an exorcism on her. And it seemed from everything we've heard afterwards that she felt better. And there was a moment she passes out, which the priest was telling us that's a common thing during possessions, like, 'cause it's just so much energy expelled that they literally would just pass out once it's done. So it was just weird that like everybody had an experience,
Yeah, it was crazy to watch her in the chair in the church getting that exorcism, and then slump over so suddenly. Mm-hmm. To see the way she was affected. It was really crazy.
One thing that interested me about that story, it was its portrayal on the screen. When the kids were in the house, like, there was a lot of foreshadowing towards the young boy.
Right.
And it seemed like he was being affected, but he was expressing it more than she was, which may have been what caused her issues, in my opinion, was she was possibly internalizing it rather than saying, "Hey, this is making me uncomfortable."
Right, exactly. She was kind of bottling it up, and ultimately made her be more vulnerable to it, possibly. Or even this, whatever, one of the entities hitched a ride on the son first. We don't know what, he could have been weird for a few hours after leaving the house, and then it jumped over to his sister. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened when they first got home, but, that's another theory we kind of threw around, was like, oh, maybe it did affect him. And I remember it was weird when they were there. There was a whole moment in the basement where the mother was like, "Why are you kicking me?" and started yelling at the son. And we see it on camera, like, he never kicked her. And
yeah, she's just like out of nowhere. It's just like, "Don't you be kicking me."
Right? Yeah. And he's like, "What? I didn't do anything. What are you talking about?" We're like, "Oh."
I really like Zach's moment in the basement with the kids. I think that was one of the better parts of the doc. So folks, go check that out. That was a really good little interview. Now, in Zach's voiceover at like the very beginning of the movie, he suggests that this film was like cursed. There were troubles with the crew, all kinds of production issues. You were working on the project, Jay. Did you ever get the feeling that something was like acting against you?
100% of the time. It was, I remember there was a time, there's so many times, a few personally that jump out. I remember one time we were in the house, one of the early first times of the house, and Zach suddenly got affected and literally grabbed me and started pushing me like he was trying to push me through this window that was there. And I actually had to, kind of push his arm off me and hold him back and just kind of start yelling at him, be like, stop, what are you doing? We weren't even filming either. Like, it wasn't, we weren't like, oh, let's film and see what happens. Like, this was like, all right, we're done filming for the day. Let's lock up and head back to the hotel. And he just snapped and just basically attacked me. And luckily we had security cameras rolling, so we were able to capture the footage of that. But that was personally a really scary moment.
Glad you brought that up. That was a question I wanted to ask, is like, in that moment, like, what his demeanor was like. Was he like, I'm gonna...
Oh, yeah, it was rage. It was full on rage, and he grabbed me, gripped my shirt, and was like pushing me right towards the window. And luckily I was able to like twist and kind of like back away, and just he kept pushing me. And I've known Zach for years now, for over a decade, and we've been in so many different situations all around the world together. And like, I know the guy, I film him, I shoot the stuff he's in. Like, I know how he looks, I know his eyes, I know, what I mean? It's when you film somebody so much, you notice those things, and it wasn't him. I can see him, and I've seen him kind of change in other moments, certain locations we're in, and that was definitely one where like I knew it wasn't him, and it was terrifying, but I was able to kind of be like, all right, like, I know it's not him, let me just keep pushing back and kind of snap him out of it. And then another moment which I remember, which was weird, was, I don't even think it was in the documentary, but we were having trouble setting up the security cameras. Like, I think we went through like 5 different systems. Like, they would just flat out fail, like, for no reason. We had security specialists come in and they're like, I have no idea, this should be working fine, and it just doesn't. And I remember one moment, we set the cameras to be like, all right, we were worried about time, like how much, recording time we have available. And it got to a point where we're like, well, they're not recording on motion for some reason. Like, it's just not working right. And then I was like, hey, why don't we, and once again, this isn't filmed, we were just trying to figure out the setup. And I was like, why don't we just let it roll 24 hours, And then we're like, it's too much footage. Like, we just, roll 24 hours a day for weeks and weeks. And I mean, we shot it over the course of years, and like, it would just be insane amount of footage and just wouldn't be practical. So we're like, no, we'll leave it on motion and just hopefully it will work. We go back to the hotel where you can look at the cameras on your phone. We look at it, we're like, wait a minute, all the cameras are set and recording 100%. Like, they're not set on motion anymore. Like, they are recording 24/7. And we're like, we didn't do that. When we left, we set it to record on motion. So we start rewinding. We kind of find the point where it switched to recording full 24/7. And you see me sitting there and you see me talking. You can't hear it. But I was like, that's the moment when I said, why don't the cameras just record 24/7? And somehow the cameras switched in that moment to record 24/7. And I feel like whatever was there, like, I tended to throw out a lot of theories while I was there. I was kind of like, oh, maybe it's this, trying to figure it out. And every time I would get to a point where I'm trying to like figure out stuff, like something weird would happen, like a camera would break, or it would just kind of like almost as if it's trying to stop us. Like, we're getting close, like you're
some
pursuing
sort of intelligent.
Yeah, like you're pursuing this evil villain, and every time you get close, they do something to kind of like throw you back a little bit. And it honestly felt like that. And just the energy in general was constantly evil. I remember the first time ever walking into that house, it literally felt like you were walking into a spider web. Like, and there was nothing there. There was no spider webs, but it feels like just this energy web that you walk in. It just felt so ominous and dark, and you could just tell that something wasn't right there.
Yeah, very crazy, dude. So we talked about Gary a little bit. We talked about kids, and we've talked about how like evil this thing is, Lee. We've seen, I don't know what it is, for whatever reason, it seems like kids in these stories are like prime victims. Lee, that's been our experience just researching episodes of the show.
Yeah, you see the theme of children being the victims in so many cases, or sinners of the activity. You've got things like the Bell Witch, where it essentially is centered around one lady of the Bell family. You've got things like William Dorian's daughter, also another young lady.
Going back all the way to the Salem witch trials.
Going
you got,
back,
the young Paris girl, right? Kids under stress are somehow affected by this more than other kids.
Now, to a certain extent, you think the poltergeist phenomenon, which is in most cases believed to be not an outside entity, but actually from the stress and from the hormones and everything from said or that child. But in this case, it's very different. In this case, it's definitely centered around the child, and that's just like the starting point. It's like the child was the most vulnerable person at that time. They chose the child so that it could latch on to something and stay on this plane, and then look for other weaker people to take on. So it jumps from the child to an older child to another child, and eventually gets to the mom.
Well, and there's a lot going on in this particular case, Jay. I guess our question is, after we've seen this entity affect Zach and turn him to rage, and the way it affected the family, like, what do you think the relationship was between this entity and like the violence that we see around in the area and on screen?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of explored that a little bit. We were wondering, if this place isn't just a house. Maybe this like portal, if you will, this source of evil energy has been here for a long time. And we started digging into, we started talking to neighbors, and there's just we have so much information that we could probably do a follow-up, really. We talked to neighbors, and we're like, wow, actually 2 doors down there was like a suicide, and over here they're having activity. And we started finding that the area surrounding that house particularly was kind of like the epicenter of a lot of crazy activity going around in that neighborhood.
Yeah,
so
very cool.
So here's kind of an off-the-cuff question. I'm sorry, Dan, to interrupt, but you mentioned that it's kind of the center of the activity. So not to give too many spoilers, I'm hoping our listeners have already watched the show, or if they're already interested in stuff like this, they probably already know that in the end, Zach has the building torn down. What is your thoughts on how that was a solution? To me, for like demonic possession and everything, I lean more towards it's in the land than it's physically in the house itself. In most cases, do you feel that that was the proper well, I guess I shouldn't say. I'm not asking you to disagree with Zach. I'm just. Do you feel that was the proper solution?
I think ultimately, yes. We definitely, and it wasn't an easy decision even for Zach. I remember we spent a lot of time debating it amongst ourselves, like, should we do this? What should we do? Like, kind of figuring, and then kind of like, what if we do? Like, what happens when you do that? And I think as far as like attachment, like, I think you're right. I think a lot of it is in the land. We've done stuff since then where we've had people go to the site, and we've conducted investigations remotely with people at the site, and things would happen. But there's also, the stone tape theory where energy can soak into organic material, which can also be the land, but also the house. That house saw whatever was going on in there. It saw a lot of violence. It saw a lot of negativity. It saw, all that happen. And I think that does soak into the house, especially the wood and organic materials. It has a memory of that. And, I feel anybody that ever ended up moving back into that house would feel that, So it kind of was a point where like, all right, well, this house was just, and the things we experienced and Zach experienced, and, the family, and, digging the research and finding this it didn't start with the Ammons. This has been going back for a while, and, we ultimately came to that decision, and Zach was like, all right, let's do it. He's like, I want to tear it down. Like, we feel that's probably just to, get rid of it so that it doesn't, I guess, keep hurting future people living there, if because eventually someone else would live in the house, and who knows, it could possess them, it could affect their lives. So in a sense, I think that's maybe the reason why it was ultimately torn down, in hopes that it wouldn't keep affecting people.
Even if it was like torn down, I mean, there's got to be remnants of the house still in the land somewhere.
Well, and there's
in a
landfill. There's also remnants of the house rebuilt at the Haunted Museum here in Vegas.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And it's one of the darkest, scariest exhibit display rooms that I've been at in the museum.
Oh, wait, yeah, because I remember at the end of the film, he was talking about how he kept stuff, and yeah, that's right.
One of the interesting thoughts on that is, from a purely skeptical point of view, that was probably not the most ideal situation if you were trying to prove that there really was stuff going on. But it sounds like you and Zach and your entire team were absolutely convinced. But there are skeptics out there that say that it's possible that was torn down as a means to an end to avoid further research from outside sources.
Right. And I guess I could see that. Everyone can, come up with claims or whatever. But, being there, it definitely wasn't. And like I said, it wasn't an easy choice. We kind of definitely debated. And then, I don't know, I felt it was an interesting, almost philosophical, paranormal question. Like, what does happen? Like, does that energy remain? It was almost like, all right, we're going to protect people from living there to get it, but we're also going to see what happens when you tear down the actual shell. Does it release it into the world? Is it, affecting the neighbors? It was kind of a, let's hope nothing crazy bad happens, but let's see what happens, and I think after, we weren't just there, Ghost Adventures, we go to a place and we're there for about a week and then we come home. This, we went there off and on for probably a couple of years. I forget exactly how long, but we were there a long time and it wore on us. All of us, Zach had permanent physical changes from that house, and I think by the end of it, we were all just oh, man, excuse me, but fuck that house, after everything we've been through, it,
serious.
We just don't even want to see it, don't want anything to do with it. That's just, in our, and it's in the ancient days where they come and invade a city and they just burn it to the ground and get rid of it like it never existed, and it kind of slowly fades away in history.
Very cool. Go for it, Jay. This is an explicit podcast.
Right.
We try and keep it PG-13, but I mean, that was one really good use of the F-bomb. So
thank you.
Props to you there. I'm really glad you brought up the stone tape theory too, because there's that exposed portion of earth underneath the stairs in the basement. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, stone tape, right? It's in the ground. But with the history of the house, the purported history of the house, the, murders, suicides, all kinds of things, the deaths, I think tearing it down and leaving just whatever's in the ground, probably better. Plus, you don't want, they'd had issues with squatters over there. You don't want people coming in there messing around. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Kids with Ouija boards doing God knows what.
I heard about that. We would, we had security cameras and security systems, but even when we're not there, it was going off. People would just drive up and try to get in all the time. And, it definitely was
it's definitely something I would have done as a teenager.
I probably would have too. I can't blame them, but but don't try breaking into places you're not supposed to.
Exactly.
Mike, we never.
But use your better judgment.
We didn't necessarily break in, but I remember doing that with you when you were up here, driving through Hoptown.
What did we? Oh yeah, we did. Yeah.
Oh, that place is definitely
the first time
haunted.
we hung out. Yeah. we went searching for the. Did you ever hear? Have you ever heard of the Hopkinsville Goblins case?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, it was one of the early UFO alien sightings to make major news. And yeah, it was actually in Kelly, right? It was a tiny little town. So we're just he had just moved to Clarksville. We were hanging out, just trying to get to know each other and all that. So we hop in his tiny little car and drive to Hopkinsville and just start driving around. And we ran up on
Kentucky, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, it's just it's 20 miles up into Kentucky from Clarksville, Fort Campbell, and so we just start driving through town. We go to the museum. It was like a local museum or whatever, and start talking to these old ladies. They're having some sort of weird function, and people are bringing in food, and we're like, "Hey, do you guys know anything about this alien sighting from like the 40s?" And it was a good time. So we just started driving. The lady gave us a general direction, and we just spotted a UFO out in the middle of a field.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it was
wild.
like across the street from where the thing happened. Anyways, that's a totally different thing. This is Demon
Right.
House, but
Nice.
yeah, it was good.
But on the way back
that's
from
an
that,
awesome story.
Mike and I made a stop because on the way into Hopkinsville, we saw a house, and the first thing Mike says to me is, that place is definitely haunted.
It's haunted and smells like cat piss. Nice. If I remember the yes, we drove around the town a little bit, and we found like specific houses that just look haunted as shit. Yeah, and we walked around like this old broken down house with these boarded up windows. Just started like walking around, and it was creepy, dude. It was creepy.
It was
very cool, guys. Well, let's move on to a quick little break because we've got more questions for Jay coming up right after this.
Are you a fan of movies?
Or comics?
Or video games?
Or just anything else nerdy?
Well, you should check out the Zing This Podcast. And that's spelled
Zeng.
This. And we have nerdy topics from comic book reviews to in-depth analysis of iconic nerdy movies, as well as video game discussions. Mm-hmm. Where's some of the best places to find us, Allie?
Well, Podbean, of course.
You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play.
Anywhere else you listen to your podcast. Yeah.
So check us out. Once again, that is
Zing This.
And we're back. Welcome back, Beyonders. We are still here with Mr. J. And I believe we've got some more questions for him. I know I do. Dan, you're leading this. Let's get back to it.
Okay. So one of the things in the documentary, which I was really glad you guys included, was this call that Zach gets from a Hollywood producer who's trying to get film rights to this story. This is something the general public probably doesn't think of when they see a lot of these stories. But when one of them gets popular, it becomes something in the culture that people try to take advantage of. I mean, let's be honest. So it just... Oh, here. I wrote down such a good question, but I haven't been reading from my notes. Now, I don't think the family in this particular case was faking their possession story. Either they genuinely believed it or, who knows? Or it was totally 100% real. But it seems like the fact that there is big money can cast some serious doubt on these supernatural claims. Jay, you're a filmmaker yourself. What do you think about the influence of money on stories like Demon House?
I think after the fact, it's what it is. I think if people are making up stuff in like hopes of a payday or things like that, I think that's absolutely terrible, and that's just a wrong way to go about and just deceitful and just honestly disgusting.
That just seems like a really weird thing to do, is make up a possession story. Like, wouldn't it just be better if you wrote a script?
Right, yeah. And like ultimately, like if you are faking, like you're gonna get caught, like especially when like people, like us are coming in there, we're spending time and bringing in engineers and scientists and tons of equipment to actually document and, interview everybody, like we're going to catch it, and if we caught evidence, we would have, it would have been a different documentary. We would have presented that like, oh, actually, you know what? This didn't really happen. But, luckily in this case, everything we did encounter and everything we experienced and everything we learned, points to and proves that, I believe them. I believe, their story. I believe that their experiences really happened to them. And whatever they're doing after the fact, if they wanted to hope, oh, maybe we could make money from it, like who knows? And that's, their business if they want to do it after the fact. But I 100% believe that what was going on to them was actually going on.
Yeah. It just seems really weird to try and fake it. And anyone who's ever seen an exorcism movie knows, like, the Catholic Church doesn't just step in and do an exorcism. Like, that's always a major plot point in the movie. Like, the church isn't just going to come over to your house and do it.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of steps of approval and things like that. I think it ultimately actually has to go back to the Vatican and get approval from there.
I mean, we learned a little bit about that with the William Dorian story, and he couldn't get approval from the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
He ultimately had to try to do it on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. And the thing is, I guess for most people, their only experience with an exorcism ever is going to be a movie, right? So it's just this weird thing where afterwards people like glom onto it. It's so strange. It's one of those weird quirks of Hollywood that like I said, a normal person wouldn't ever think about until they see it in a movie like yours.
Right. And then too, like when, there are movies that are made from true stories and, Hollywood ends up coming in and twist it. They change people around. Like the original Exorcist was actually based on a story about a boy. It wasn't even a girl. And, they changed it for the movie purposes to be a girl. But originally it was actually a young boy, which we actually got to investigate the original house that inspired that movie. But it was interesting. And then we also, a couple years ago, we did the original Conjuring house, and hearing the actual story of that, the history, and then you see the movies and you're like, oh, okay. I see, like, generally how it's there, but they twist and change things all the time.
Yeah, it's got to be better for the big screen, right? More exciting.
Right.
So.
Well, even like the Warrens themselves would kind of like be like allow or like elaborate, embellish, if you will, and all that stuff. Yeah.
And I think they were brought in as producers on those movies as well. Like, I think they were actually listed as producers. So who knows what their deal was.
Well, and I mean, this is something we see in the history of paranormal lore going back. We just did a big thing on the Salem witch trials. One of the court recorders was embellishing all of these stories. And sometimes it's because these people are true believers and they want whatever force it is eradicated, and I guess sometimes it's just because they think it'll make a better story that they can sell later. But it just this family, they just never struck me as those sorts of people. And especially with all the witnesses surrounding them, it just seemed odd.
Yeah, it was a thing too that I think that backs up their claims is that they weren't, when it happened, they weren't pushing for media or attention at the time. It actually was a few years later that the story actually came out. They already left the house. They already went through the exorcism. They already did all that. They left. They moved to, where they ended up moving to, and they have their new life. They're doing their thing. And then the story just kind of broke out at some point, so it shows me that if they were trying to do it to make money or get fame, then they would be on top of that from the beginning and trying to push it to get it while it was happening.
That's an important thing to definitely know in that is that it wasn't until later that all this stuff really came out. They were literally just trying to
they were just trying to move on with their life.
Yeah. That is a key point right there. Now, Jay, we see you in the movie shooting scenes. We also see another cameraman who becomes affected by the entity. And the way he is affected is similar to Zach's, but he has to leave the production. He eventually gets fired or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me the way that LaToya and her family were affected, the way Zach was affected, the way the cameraman were affected, all slightly different, but all still mostly the same. You know what I mean? Like LaToya got a legit exorcism. Zach didn't get that, but Adam, the cameraman, didn't get that either. It's weird, this relationship between there's some nuance to it, I guess is what I'm trying to say, between being full on possessed and being affected by these spirits. You have a lot of experience with this. Can you speak to that nuance?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's going to have a different experience. I think it comes from your mindset, your possibly religious beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, however you feel, however you perceive things, it's going to affect you slightly different, person to person. And in our case, especially with Adam, I knew Adam for years before that. He was a friend of mine, still a friend of mine. I still talk to him once in a while. And, it was interesting because even before Adam, because a lot of times it was just Zach and myself, and, Billy was with us. He would, help us out with things as well. And so it was just very few of us. We didn't have a big crew. And then we would go out, and certain times we're like, all right, we want to shoot a little more this trip. So let's bring on an extra camera guy or bring on a couple people. And even before Adam, we had, a couple extra production assistants that came out, an extra camera guy. And then after, that experience of filming, and then we were like, hey, we're going back to film, and they refused to come back. They didn't want to come back and work again because they just didn't like the energy of it. They were, I don't want to speak for them directly, but, from what they kind of relayed to us is that they just were scared in a sense, from what they saw and heard and experienced. They didn't want to get caught up in it, and fair enough. I can't blame them for that. And then it got to a point where we're like, all right, we do need to bring on another camera guy. And I reached out to my friend Adam and asked him if he wanted to come out and shoot. And, the experiences that happened to him and, kind of seeing him break down. And, he wasn't fired. Like, he was honestly too disturbed from it all. And it affected him so much that we're like, all right, the best thing for you is to get out of here. I'm afraid, it's going to get worse for you if you try to stay, And I remember it's not even in the film. And, like I say, he's a friend of mine. I remember when he bugged out in the hotel and he had that experience with the elevator and all that. After all that, I'm sitting with him in the stairwell of the hotel, and I'm just like, hey, man, are you okay? No camera, nothing filming, and just kind of worried for him as a friend. And, and he's like, honestly, Jay, coming out here, he's into the paranormal, he's into horror movies, and, he's all tattooed. He's into that, death metal. He's, into that kind of world vibe of things. And he's like, but I never believed it. He's like, I don't believe that stuff. He's like, I'm into it. You might think I do. He's like, but I don't believe it. He's like, I've been out here with you guys for 3 days, and I 100% believe it, and it's, destroyed his mind. It, freaked him out so much that he kind of lost his mind. And then, it was ultimately because he's like, I never believed it. He's like, I thought I would come out here and be like, oh, this is, I see what they're doing. This is bullshit. And he's like, no, holy shit. I was out here for a few days, and my mind is blown. I've seen things I can't explain. I'm being affected. And he actually was breaking down. He was crying with me, and, I was trying to talk him through things and how to help and get through stuff. And, and then we decided the best thing would be to send you home. And then even when he got home, I remember he called me and he started seeing things. He got in his car. I remember him telling me, and he saw the terrifying cloud. You look in the rearview mirror and he saw the demon in the backseat of the car.
Really?
And and then he lost his car keys, and just a whole series of bad luck really hit him really hard when he left. And then I remember, and I felt kind of bad because he started from, talking to him, and he started feeling better and kind of getting better. And I was like, hey man, we really want to film with you a little bit more, just to kind of have you recap your experience. And we also want you to take a lie detector test. Not that we don't believe you, but we just, we want to, we want to pursue everything. We want to, without a doubt, try to prove as much as we can. So we want you to take a lie detector test. And I remember he came, we actually met at my parents' house in Jersey, and I shot a little interview with him. And he's like, oh yeah, at first he was all happy. He's like, oh yeah, I've been good. Things are fine. And we started talking about it, getting back into it. He stops and goes to the bathroom, almost throws up. And he's just it started affecting him again, and it got really bad. And, and luckily now, from what I hear from him, he's doing well, and, he's a filmmaker and doing his thing. And, but he kind of had to just shut it off and step away from all that. And, and I haven't bugged him about it or tried to talk to him about it, because I get it. Sometimes the best thing to do is to just, lack of a better term, ignore it. Don't feed into it, and I think that's what ultimately got him to kind of get back to normal, if you will.
Way cool. Yeah, wow. There was one thing, he was with the scientist, the bioenergy specialist. Yeah. His story is very compelling. I don't want to get into that one too much, because I think that leads us into Zach's story and some spoilers. So we're going to try and step around the end just a little bit. We don't want to reveal too much, but I think some of the things that Lee has talked about with the skeptical analysis are really spot on. And I love talking to you, Jay, because my default is to be like, I'm sitting here watching it on TV. I'm like, oh, that's all bullshit, right? But to talk to someone who was there, it's very, very different. So, like, there's this big disconnect between a skeptic sitting on their couch and an investigator in the trenches. Right?
And I don't blame you, I mean, and even everything, to this day when we film, I always approach everything skeptically. I want to be like, all right, what is going on? Is this really happening? Let's seek out to prove it or disprove it. I never just instantly go with it. I want to be proven to myself. So I get the natural thought of being a skeptic and calling it out, and it's on TV and things, and it's tough to be like, oh, it's a TV show, but I can honestly say this isn't it's not just a TV show for us. Like, it is our life. Like, and luckily we have the control. We don't have a network that tells us what to do. We don't have producers that tell us what to do, or, oh, say that again, do this, do that. Like, never been like that, never has been. It's literally the four of us running around, doing whatever we feel we need to do to pursue it. It's a raw documentary, really. Each episode we make, and the film as well. And I love that freedom and realness that we get to do. And just, if we don't get things, we show you that. If we get things, we show you that. It's just, it's literally just our adventure trying to do this. And
well, and I hope this conversation helps kind of bridge that gulf between a skeptic sitting on their couch and you guys who are in the trenches out there doing it, right? Because that's actually, despite as much as you try and portray on the screen, it's still a pretty big disconnect. And I think right here we've gone into some of the stuff that is actually kind of bridging that gap. Yeah, which I think is really cool.
And I think there'll always be skeptics. And like I said, I don't mind them. I feel you should try to figure it out, And all I can say to skeptics is, like, go out and experience it for yourself. And sometimes that's what it takes. It takes your own personal experiences to be like, all right, there is something here, and, like, don't believe us. Go out and, explore yourself. Try to figure it out,
Well, and Mike, we all know guys who want to debunk just for the sake of debunking, right?
Yeah, I know some people like that.
yeah. It's sometimes it's fun on the internet, but
yeah, for sure. And Lee, you've always seemed to be somewhat skeptical of, I guess, ghostly things, right?
Yeah, I mean,
right, but loves Bigfoot. But loves Bigfoot.
Oh, I absolutely love
interdimensional Bigfoot totally exists, but god damn it, Grandma's not here.
So yes,
I'm the same way about aliens, man.
I tend to err on the more skeptical side of things, especially when it comes to, like, ghost and demonic phenomenon. But one thing that really, like Dan was saying, really bridges that gap is actually sitting and talking with Jay. Because for me, it's very easy to be like, oh, well, that Zach's an actor, or Adam's, pretty good actor. It's very easy to do that from the couch. But to actually get a chance to talk with somebody, ask our own questions, ask questions that some of those skeptics would be interested in asking, and hearing Jay's true and sometimes bordering on emotional response, and what really happened to him, it makes it more real for me and makes it it makes me more of a believer in it. I've always tried to keep an open mind, but you're right. I tend to err significantly more skeptical about ghosts and other things than I do about cryptid creatures and stuff.
Yeah, very cool stuff. Anyways, wow, I love it. I think this has been great. But
I had just a really quick question. This just kind of occurred to me, like as we're talking, and I guess when I was watching the film as well. But so is there? And this is a totally random thing, not a very serious question. But is there a reason why Aaron was never involved in the movie?
No,
because the you, Billy, and
right.
Zach are in there.
Nothing specifically. There was no reason. I mean, at the same time we were doing the movie, we were shooting Ghost Adventures as well. So we would shoot Ghost Adventures, and even when we shoot Ghost Adventures, it's different than other shows because we actually shoot consistently all through the year. Most TV shows will shoot a season, take like 2 or 3 months, shoot a season, and then you're off for the rest of the year. But our show, we shoot basically 2 episodes a month, every other week consistently, and it's been that way forever. So I think just the schedule of it was really tough. Like we were traveling all the time. Like we would shoot Ghost Adventures, maybe go home for a weekend and then fly up to Gary and work on the documentary. So things like that. And 2, I think our initial goal was to we didn't want it to be 100% like a Ghost Adventures episode, even though obviously, there's always going to be that feeling, when we're all involved with it. But we didn't want it just to be like, oh, it's strictly, we wanted to, at least approach it as slightly different, so I think, maybe that wasn't necessarily like a direct reason for not, but I think maybe subconsciously it was kind of a thing. Like, if all 4 of us were there, it was like, all right, it's like
a long Ghost Adventures
right, it's
episode.
exactly the same. So it was kind of just like an attempt, maybe, like I said, it wasn't necessarily planned out, but I think it was just like kind of maybe a subconscious approach of being like, oh, we'll approach it a little bit differently than the show, and kind of.
Yeah. Well, I watched episodes of Ghost Adventures right after watching Demon House, and I can tell you guys hit it spot on. There is a definite difference, and I think it's it's a feature. Like it's gonna be different, and I really appreciated the feature. I thought it was actually a lot more interesting to delve into this case. And I wish I've been trying the whole time this whole week to try and work up some Zach Baggins, Stormy Daniels jokes. Haven't been able to do it. And after having this great conversation with Jay, I'm like, shit, who even cares about the jokes anymore? This has been really good. So I've been really enjoying this. This has been a great conversation. And I just want to end it. We don't want to, spoil the movie, although Lee already went into it a little bit.
You're welcome.
But at the end, Zach has a moment by himself, which is kind of the big end of the movie, and it's very crazy. I love that you guys actually put like furniture in the house. That was cool. That was a nice touch. But what was it like leaving him there alone? That's my question.
Yeah, I was nervous for him, because at this point, that was one of the last things we did. And at that point, we already knew it was haunted. We already knew it was evil. So, but we're like, he's like, all right, I want to do it. It was his idea. He's like, I want to get locked in there, board up the windows, I just lock me in there. We're like, all right. And we're like, oh, let's put furniture in so it's livable. So it's, and if you notice too, and that was one of the separations, from doing it differently than Ghost Adventures, it wasn't really investigating, at that moment. You kind of just wanted to live there, just be there and just kind of observe and just see what happens and experience it. And ultimately lock him in so he can't get out. So if stuff starts happening, there's no way for him to get out. And it was, it was kind of a somber moment. I felt bad for him. He's one of my best friends, and the fear of knowing what could happen, and what we just heard and witnessed already. It was tough. And I remember he would text me while he was in there and kind of being like, I don't know, and I'm like, just stick with it. Push through. You'll be all right. And and unfortunately, some crazy stuff did happen. And I remember, like, when I got home, I went through all that footage, for days, like just watching security footage and seeing if there's any evidence. And the evidence that he caught was insane. Still don't know what it is, and it's terrifying. That when you watch that clip over and over again, like, it still gives me chills seeing it, and to know how it affected him, physically, even without spoiling too much, but like how it literally physically affected him, and he's still, dealing with that today, which is pretty wild. And, I feel like, I don't want to say a downside of the documentary, but I feel like the more we learned, the more we experienced, the more we found out, it kind of just brought more questions. It kind of brought more like, wow, what is it? Like, it just kept going, like we learned a lot, we discovered a lot of things, but it also brought up a lot of questions, a lot of philosophical questions, like what happens once the home is gone, like the long-term effects of hauntings and possessions, and how it can hop between different people and different family members, and, and the idea of literally bad luck, like that whole shoot, the whole production, everybody involved was like literally swimming in bad luck the entire time. Like, it was just constant, one thing after another. Like, we couldn't believe it. Like, we couldn't, like, wow, now this happened. Oh, we filmed the scene. Oh, wait, the camera just malfunctioned and we don't have it. Oh, great, cool. Like, it was just one thing after, oh, the house inspector just called us. He just had some crazy thing just happen after he left the house. It was just one thing after another. And it was as fascinating and amazing it was. It was truly a terrifying place. And, when I do interviews now and podcasts and press and stuff, and they always ask, what's one of the scariest places you've ever been? And hands down, it was that house in Gary, Indiana.
Dude, very awesome. Lee, wrap us up, man. Your final thoughts on Demon House and our conversation with Jay. What do you think?
For me, going into it, I came in very skeptical. I come out a little bit more of a believer, a little bit more of a, how do I put this right? I'm just gonna say
agnostic.
No, I was gonna say a little bit less of a
little more open,
and a little more open to Zach Bagans, like, in general. He's gotten a bad rap in many ways, and I think that this particular movie, and just talking with Jay and learning more about everything that they went through, for me, it really helped me get back to that openness that I think had been clouding, or had been starting to cloud over a little bit more. But yeah,
well, maybe next time you won't be such an asshole. Okay.
Wow. I don't feel like I was an asshole, but okay.
No, you
tell us how you really feel, Dan.
I was just throwing that.
Oh, there's that rage that comes out with the possession. I don't know.
That's what it is.
Yeah, right.
It's still living through you.
Right.
It went through the computer, through Skype, and now it's
told you how his experiences he's had in our studio here.
I actually told it on the Halloween episode.
The moon.
Yeah, that night. It was the same night.
Yeah, there's more and more. The other, I don't even know if I told you yet. The other night I was in the other side, and I was just sitting there totally by myself. No one was here. And I'm just sitting there. I think I was actually playing Charles's guitar, just kind of playing around, killing some time. All of a sudden, just boom, full-on bang on the door over there to the warehouse. The whole wall shook, and I literally jumped out of the seat, and I just froze. And I put the guitar down. I went right outside. I was like, all right, like my first thought was besides being scared and shaken by it, was that all right, someone's in here. Someone just broke into the studio. Mm-hmm. What's going on? And I was like, why didn't the cameras go off? Why didn't Yeah. But there was nothing there, and that actually really shook me. I literally jumped from that.
Yeah,
one.
I mean, it seems like now everybody's had some sort of experience in here.
Yeah, Charles, the guy that works here, he's had his phone go flying off one of the carts before.
Yeah, we were gonna have a seance in here. It didn't work out, unfortunately.
Yeah. But we still will, I'm sure, at some point.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's cool, dudes. Well, guys, I got to tell you, this doc, it was something else. I've watched it twice now, almost 3 times. But my kid's crazy. So
Kids
it was
crazy.
Really good. Yeah, it was really good. I thought it was for me personally, I thought it was much better than just 22. I like features though. I really love features. So I love a feature documentary. This was right in my wheelhouse. Nice. I think for me as a person who has never been into ghosts at all, this was a really great way to get into it, talking with Jay. I think you wrapped it up beautifully, Jay. You were there. You know what was going on. I think to spread this out to folks who might not have been into it or who are fans and are into it is a really good way to kind of bridge the gap between two different ideas of people, it's just a great conversation. Yeah. So I'm really glad we got to talk to you today.
Thanks. Yeah,
Mike,
it was awesome.
Your final thoughts. What did you think about the flick? You're sitting right next to Jay, so you better say it was amazing. Like, should have won an Oscar.
This was a work of art that I had. No, I thought it was great. When it first came out, I remember when it first came out, my sister, you met my crazy sister. Yeah. Hi, Michelle. She'll be listening.
Hi, Michelle.
But she texts me, and she goes, you guys... talking about me and my wife, you guys have to watch this like right now. And I'd heard about it, and it came out and everything. She's like, I just watched it. It's really freaking me out because he's talking about how possession can come through media, through film, through TV. I don't know what to expect, and I'm like, you're crazy.
Right.
Yeah,
it sounds great. But honestly, since that came out, I still get messages from fans and stuff that have watched it, and they're like, oh, after I watched it, this happened or that happened, and it's like, geez, maybe there is something to it, which once again, that's another question that comes out, when you present this stuff, can things pass through electronic media and come through?
Yeah, I think to get my actual thoughts on the whole thing, I think that you guys really started to narrow in on something very intense, we can all be skeptical, and I've always felt that I've always been a true full believer in we'll say energy's not exactly in this dimension, is maybe the best way to put it, but ghosts, whatever. Ever since I was a kid, I grew up in a haunted house. Me and my family are completely convinced it was haunted in Idaho Falls, and so I've always been really really into this stuff, and so watching through it, it gave me some strange feelings for sure. The only things that I was kind of weird about was some of the members of the family. That's neither here or there, but no, I think it was really a big documentary for the paranormal world, for sure.
Very cool. And I'll just throw out too, we're not sure what, but we are, we're going to keep doing more. This is what we love to do. We're doing more of the show. Zach and I have been talking about another documentary of some sort. So there's definitely going to be more in the works, more to come. One thing that's really exciting that I'll throw out real quick is that so Discovery Channel, who owns Travel Channel, is launching a streaming service, Discovery Plus, which every single Ghost Adventures episode ever will be available on that to stream at any time. And also, I'm really excited, which it's a 2-hour special that's going to be exclusive on Discovery Plus, that it all starts streaming January 4th, of the investigation we did at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles.
Ooh.
Which was... if you're not sure what the Cecil Hotel is, one of the most famous things was the Elisa Lam story, which was the woman in the elevator that kind of freaks out and then vanishes, and they don't find her for a while, and then people in the hotel start complaining that the water was weird, and they find her actually up in the water tank on the roof of the hotel. Richard Ramirez lived there while he was killing as the Night Stalker, another serial killer, so many suicides, murders. It inspired the American Horror Story Hotel season. It's truly and I hate to say it, but I guess in a weird way, a positive of this whole pandemic is that, we've always wanted to get in there, but it was finally closed because of the pandemic, and we were actually able to get in there. We had all the floors to ourselves, and just the 4 of us got to investigate this massive, infamous hotel. And it's going to be a 2-hour special on Discovery Plus, streaming January 4th.
Dude, that's really cool. Don't Stories of the Cecil go all the way back to like the Black Dahlia?
Yeah. I think that's the Black Dahlia was last spotted at the Cecil. That was the last time she was seen alive.
That's one of my favorite.
Oh man, yeah, it just seems like this crazy. It's like a hub.
Yeah. Oh, it's and
for
it's
darkness.
right. It's right on Skid Row too.
Yeah.
You just walk outside the hotel. There's
Skid
literally
Row.
camps, and it's
a strange place.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm super excited for this. I even texted you last night.
I
was
love
just
it.
like, I'm so excited for it because it just seems to be like there's certain things in the world that just energy gets attracted to, and I think that hotel is one of them.
Oh, yeah.
Where dark energy just finds itself there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Okay, one more plug, Jay. Instead of Lee's terrible ad read, tell us a little bit about Simple Equations Media, where you guys are recording right now.
Yeah, so Simple Equations Media is my production company that we have a great team here, including Mike. We can provide development and crew and equipment and actual production needs for whether it's music, if you want to record an album, if you need to make a commercial, a music video, corporate video. We do short films. We've done feature films. It's tough because it's time consuming, but we do it. And like any aspect, whether it's from, just organizing, development, crew, equipment. And we have a full post-production studio as well where we can edit, do special effects, music, sound design, Foley, ADR, voiceover, all that good stuff. And you can find out more about it at simpleequationsmedia.com.
Very cool. Thank you, Jay, for coming on. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Mike, for hooking us up with this. Mike's an OG BT founding father. This was a really cool doc. If you guys watch Demon House and see some of Jay's cinematography, you like the shots, you like what you see, call up Simple Equations. Maybe they can shoot something for you. So that'll be pretty cool.
Do it.
Yes, check out this documentary. It was totally worth it. You've got some behind the scenes info now. Very cool. And I guess just keep looking out for more tales from out there beyond terrestrial.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Terrestrial, all 3 of y'all. If you're still a fan of this show, follow Beyond Terrestrial on social media and join the Beyonders Facebook group for even more strangeness. Links to everything, including previous episodes, are available at beyondterrestrial.com. That's the place to go for stickers, merch, show swag, and our Patreon. Patrons get exclusive access to ad-free shows, giveaways, and the unedited after-show show. Anything you give to the show goes straight to Funkmaster B's bachelor pad, which for now is also where these jive turkeys record this show. This show was edited by Simple Equations Media with music by Mike Root. Dan and Lee will be back next Tuesday with more from Beyond Terrestrial.